The Surangama Sutra, with excerpts from the commentary by the Venerable Master Xuanhua, a new translation from the Buddhist Text Translation Society. Part 1. The Nature and Location of the Mind. Chapter 1. The Request for Dharma. When Ananda saw the Buddha, he bowed and wept in sorrow. He regretted that since time without beginning, he had devoted himself to erudition, but had not fully developed his practice on the path. Respectfully and repeatedly, he asked the Buddha to explain for him the elementary steps that led to attainment in the wondrous practices of calming the mind, contemplative insight, and meditation in stillness, practices through which the thus come ones from all 10 directions had become fully awakened. Meanwhile, as many bodhisattvas as there are sand grains of the river Ganges, along with the great arhats, solitary sages, and others from the 10 directions, all eagerly wished to listen. They sat down and waited silently to hear instruction from the sage. Then the world-honored one, before the great assembly, extended his golden-hued arm, circled his hand on the crown of Ananda's head, and said to Ananda and to all gathered there, "There is a samadhi called the Great and Royal Surangama that is spoken from above the crown of the Buddha's head, and that is the perfection of the myriad practices. It is a wondrous and magnificent path, the unique portal through which the Buddhas in all 10 directions have passed in order to transcend the conditioned world. You should all now listen attentively." Ananda humbly bowed and waited for compassionate instruction. Why was Ananda unable to resist the evil spell, even though he was already a first-stage arhat? He had been practicing samadhi with his conscious mind. For instance, when he listened to sutras, he remembered the principles that the Buddha spoke of. But the conscious mind, which remembers the principles, cannot lead to the fundamental solution. And so when Ananda encountered a demonic influence, he failed to recognize it. The conscious mind is subject to coming into being and ceasing to be, and is not ultimate. If, instead, one bases one's practice on the true nature, which neither comes into being nor ceases to be, one can develop a samadhi which neither comes into being nor ceases to be. That is a genuine samadhi, one that cannot be affected by outside forces. The power of such a samadhi can be victorious in any set of circumstances, agreeable or disagreeable. In the midst of them all, one can remain still and just as one is, fully and forever luminous. That is genuine samadhi. If happy situations make you happy and sad events make you sad, you're being influenced by circumstances. If you keep jumping from joy to anger to sorrow to happiness, you're being influenced by circumstances. Instead, you should be like a mirror, which reflects what appears in it, and then is still. That is to have genuine wisdom. The Buddha said to Ananda, "You and I are members of the same family, and we share the affection that is natural among relatives. At the time you first made the resolve to become enlightened, what excellent attributes did you see in my Dharma that immediately led you to reject the deep familial affection and conjugal love found in the world?" Ananda said to the Buddha, "I saw the 32 hallmarks of the thus come one, which were so supremely wondrous and incomparable that his entire body shone like crystal, with an interreflecting radiance. I often thought to myself that a body with such hallmarks could not be the consequence of an act of sexual love. Why? The energies of desire are coarse and murky. Foul and putrid intercourse results in a turbid merging of procreative substances. Such things as that cannot generate a body with such a wondrous, pure, magnificent, and brilliant concentration of purple golden light. That is why I admired the Buddha, and why I let the hair fall from my head so I could follow him." The Buddha said, "Excellent, Ananda! All of you should know that since time without beginning, all beings have been undergoing death and rebirth over and over, simply because they have not been aware of the pure understanding, which is the essential nature of the everlasting true mind. Instead, the workings of their mind are distorted, and because the workings of their minds are distorted, they are bound to the cycle of death and rebirth. Now you all wish to inquire about unsurpassed enlightenment and discover the truth of your own nature. You should answer my questions straightforwardly, because that is the path that the thus come ones everywhere throughout the 10 directions have taken as they freed themselves from death and rebirth. Their minds and their words were straightforward, and therefore, at every point in their progress, from the first stage to the last, they were never in the least evasive. Now, Ananda, I ask you this. When, in response to the 32 hallmarks of the thus come one, you first made the resolve to attain full awakening, just what was it that saw those hallmarks, and who was it that took delight in them and loved them? Ananda said to the Buddha, World-honored one, I delighted in them and loved them with my mind and eyes, because I saw with my eyes the excellent hallmarks of the thus come one. My mind admired and delighted in them. In this way, I became resolved to extricate myself from death and rebirth. The Buddha said to Ananda, It is as you say. Your mind and eyes were the reason for your admiration and delight. Someone who does not know where his mind and eyes are will not be able to overcome the stress of engagement with perceived objects. Consider, for example, when bandits invade a country and the king sends forth his soldiers to drive them out. The soldiers must first know where the bandits are. It is the fault of your mind and eyes that you are bound to the cycle of death and rebirth. I am now asking you, precisely where are your mind and eyes?